Welcome back to another North Carolina Tar Heels podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you were watching us on our still fast-growing YouTube channel, even in the off-season, it's still growing fast. That is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones. Joining me is our Director of Football Recruiting, Jack of all trades, Miss Deana King. And we're doing something new here, guys. We are starting a regular feature you're going to see here on our site and on our channel called The Recruiting Show, where every once in a while, Dean and I sit down and we just discuss football recruiting. We'll hit on some players. We'll hit on some stuff that's coming up. We'll hit on some trends. We'll just sort of share with you the discussions that we have on the phone 12 times a week. We're going to kind of bring that here to a show. And we're also going to do basketball ones where I do the same thing with David Sis talking Carolina recruiting. Every once in a while, Jacob Turner is going to take my place in this chair. Like to add variety. Jacob, of course, does such a great job as well. Kind of keep things fresh here with the recruiting show. So, Deana, we got a lot to talk about. We're going to try to squeeze it in the allotted time that we have today. A couple of offers recently went out. Some 2023 kids we're going to hit on. Cayman Smith and Julian Randolph. There are 4 official visits coming up this week. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to hit on a couple of things that, quite frankly, Dean and I have been talking about for like 5 months now. I go on my walks, and I've got my phone on, and we're talking about kids being offered outside the footprint. We're talking about all the 3-stars being offered in the class of 2023. So we're going to carry that discussion here onto the first edition of the Recruiting Show. And by the way, we're looking for sponsors for this show. So if you're interested in sponsoring, we've got like 5 sponsors already lined up for different things here at THI. People keep re-upping because it's good value for what they're looking for. So if you're interested in sponsoring the Recruiting Show, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Heel Illustrated, not Heels, at Heel Illustrated. Send us a DM, and then I will get in touch with you. Someone else may get in touch with you, and we can kind of go from there. And also, if you want to be a subscriber, a member to our community, it's just $8.33 a month. All the things we're going to discuss here today, as we've already had on the boards. A lot of these things and more important information has been on the boards for a while. So if you want access to that stuff, it's just $8.33 a month, which at this point, it's like getting a gallon of gas at a candy bar. How about that? Or a gallon and 3/4 of gas for a month, and you've got all this information. So, Deana, let's go ahead and talk about the couple of kids that just got offered here recently. You spoke to both of them. We ran pieces on our site. Let's start with Kayman Smith. He's an offensive tackle, class of 23, 6'4", 275, Wilkes Central High School in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. We just posted a piece on him, I think, Tuesday morning. So what's up with him?
He's kind of in my back area up here in Wilkes County. He's kind of a sleeper. I think he's a late bloomer. I don't believe he's been to many camps, so that might be the reason for his. And I think he was a little injured last year, so that might be a reason that he's not as known. He's unranked. He's going to be ranked pretty soon at probably the next evaluation that Rivals does. But North Carolina offered him. He excels in track and field. He's a big track guy. I think he did really well in the regionals that were held Saturday, and he went on over to Chapel Hill and got offered. You read the piece. He had a lot of good things to say about Carolina, and he's just starting the recruiting process. So I expect him to get a lot of other major offers. Just don't worry about the offer list. That's some of the schools like a Furman, a Liberty, but North Carolina and North Carolina State have both offered him, and he mentions that Virginia Tech is coming on and Auburn. So I think he's a kid to keep an eye on.
To draw a comparison, that's more than what Marcus McKeithen had back when Carolina really kind of horned in on him and wanted and really made it clear they wanted his services, wanted a commitment from him. I don't think Kayman Smith is quite as tall as Marcus. He may not have as broad a base as Marcus, but McKeithen. But I think that there's an example where these kids are out there all over the place. And Larry and Fedora's staff did a phenomenal job of finding diamonds in the rough all over the place. And we're going to kind of hit on this down the road, a little tease later on the podcast. There appears to be a bit of a theme that the intent here is to maybe find some of those guys as well. And being out in front right now in the process with Kayman Smith, even though he's a 23, could bode well for Carolina.
Yeah, like I said, for whatever reasons, he's not been on a lot of radars, but he started taking visits. And when these coaches see these kids up close and personal, see them in person, and get a feel of them, they start offering. So I feel like Kayman, he will start being on radars. He's a good kid. Actually, I know his mom. She was a really good basketball player from Wilkes County too, that played at Gardner Webb. So he's got a lot of good genes, athletic genes. Like I said, he's a track and field guy. So he's athletic. So we've seen Coach Bicknell. He has a different type of player that he's recruiting than Coach Searles did, and so this is a good pickup. It's a kid from an area at North Carolina needs to start making some headway. The west of I-77 is what a lot of people talk up in the Brushy Mountains, so the western part of the state. So and he said he's nowhere near making a decision. He's just kind of overwhelmed with the recruiting process right now, with all the schools are now contacting him.
I'm going to draw another comparison with this next kid, although it's more recent as far as when he was in high school. Julian Randolph, 3-star tight end, class of 23 as well. 6'5", 210, Independence High School in Purcellville, Virginia, which is the distant D.C. suburbs, Loudoun County, which is right next to Fairfax County. They're hitting Northern Virginia harder and harder, the whole D.C. area, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But you gave me a comparison to Julian Randolph to somebody who's on the roster now. My projection for the breakout player offensively for this upcoming season, Bryson Nesbitt. So why don't you roll with it about Julian Randolph?
Well, he got offered this in May. He just got back from his a visit to UNC this past weekend. Yeah. And so he's another kid that you look at the offer list, you're like, but he's a kid that, for whatever reasons, might not have been able to go to some camps and get a lot of exposure, but he is now. He's going on visits now. And I looked at his film, and the first highlight that I saw, he was lined out at wide receiver. So immediately told you, I was like, this kid makes me think of Bryson, maybe not as weight-wise as Bryson, but his size, about 6'4", 6'5". He's about 210, 215. So I think we've hinted, in some of our conversations, that North Carolina might have something there, a good recruiting pitch for a kid that's in that kind of mold, that maybe a tight end wide receiver role. Yeah. I'm just anxious to see how Bryson Nesbitt does. So they've recruited a few kids that are in that type of mold that could play wide receiver or tight end. But he had nothing. He was basically blown away, and he basically said at this point that North Carolina was his leader. So I'm sure he will start getting some more interest from more schools. But that trip did a lot of good for Randolph and for Carolina.
As of the time that we record this, 4 official visits scheduled for this weekend. Let's roll through these pretty quickly. I'm going to crush this name. Tosin Babalade. Pardon me on that one. We've heard about 9 different pronunciations, so I'm rolling with the middle one here. We'll learn more as we go on here. He's a 3-star offensive tackle, 6'5", 295 from DeMatha Catholic, which is just outside the DC line in Maryland. It's right in between the DC line and the University of Maryland. I know the area very, very well. Played some stuff against DeMatha back in the day, so it's always neat when kids from up there are on the radar. So what do you know about him?
I know people probably want to hear me pronounce it, so I'm gonna try Tosin Babalade.
By the way, does Kayman Smith have an accent? Kayman Smith's in your neck of the woods. Does he sound anything like you?
I doubt it. I doubt it.
I'm sure he's trying not to anyway.
But he Babalade, he is going to be at Chapel Hill for official. I think he's going to South Carolina as well. I think maybe Rutgers may have one. He's a Maryland kid, so I'm sure Maryland's in the mix. But big kid. He's just coming from the Rivals camp that they had this past week. Had a good performance up there, but I believe they've got 2 commitments in Tad Hudson and another offensive lineman, Nolan McConnell out of Virginia. So and he fits the blueprint and everything, and we'll hope to get something on weekend.
Joel Starling's 4-star defensive tackle, 6'4", 310 pounds, out of Benedictine. Played them in basketball in Richmond, Virginia. That's where Chris Collins went to school. So he's kind of been on the radar for a while. And I think the theme of 2023 is not a ton of 4-star kids, a lot more 3s, right? He's a 4-star kid. They've been on for a while, and they have a chance here with Joel Starlings. And obviously, what other note about the kids coming in this weekend? Hand on the ground kids.
Big kid from Virginia, and so I consider him the top defensive line target for Carolina that's out of state. He has them in his top list. I think South Carolina is another big player for him and everything. But I think Starling's he's been to Carolina a few times, and he likes UNC. So anytime Carolina can get a Virginia kid, I'm sure that they will throw out the red carpet or the blue carpet, whatever they use out there.
Carolina blue carpet.
And I'm sure he will be mingling with a lot of the current Carolina players that are from Virginia and the defensive linemen like Travis Shaw and everything. So he could bolster that line. He's huge. He's dominant. So looking forward to see what happens with him. But I do think he's another one that Carolina has a great shot at.
And it's not just Virginia. I think Richmond's a very important area. That's where they got Andre Green Jr. from. So there's a lot of kids in that region as well. It's not just the 7'5". There's a ton of talent in Virginia. A lot of years, there's more high-end talent in Virginia than there is in North Carolina. Jamal Jarrett is from North Carolina. You know Jamal quite well. 3-star defensive tackle, 6'5", 340. He's enormous. He attends Grimsley High School in Greensboro. We've probably run more stuff on Jamal in the class of 23 than anybody else, in part because he's highly accessible and he's a fun young man. I know you like him a lot. I know he thinks the world of you, but recruiting is a business ultimately. He has to make a business decision. So he's taking his official this weekend. What does Carolina have to do to kind of reel in Jamal? Because as much as Jamal loves Carolina, was very high on them early in the process, there are other schools that have piqued his interest in, high-end big boy schools.
Well, what helps North Carolina is he is a local kid. and his ties with Travis Shaw. He considers Travis as a mentor. And so, I mean, the location being really less, maybe an hour from Greensboro, lets his family and friends and coaches come watch him and everything. And, Mac is really good stressing the family atmosphere at Carolina. And I know a lot of in recruiting, I know Roy and of course Mac, they're good with the family members. They're good with mamas and everything.
And by the way, quick sidebar: we're hearing that Hubert's excellent at this too, as we learn more about how he goes about things. So we gotta love Hubert in there if it fits, and it does fit. So go ahead.
So I mean, I'm sure they're going to work that that angle. Come join Travis and help make North Carolina be elite. But as you mentioned, he's got some really big schools in his list. Most notably Georgia, and Georgia is doing a great job recruiting him as well. I mean, you can't argue what they just did in the NFL draft. And one of the kids that was in the draft was the 13th pick, and he was a homegrown North Carolina kid out of Mallard Creek, Jordan Davis. So Georgia's using that angle, trying to get Jamal, and then Clemson. Their success in recruiting in North Carolina as well. So it's going to be a really Jamal is a highly impressionable kid. So I mean, every visit he comes out, he loves it. But he's gonna have a hard time making that big life decision. And so and you're right, he's very accessible. I mean, always talking, always has a smile on his face. So definitely I'll have an update on him this weekend, after this weekend and everything. So I'm sure he'll have a lot of positive things to say about North Carolina. So, Carolina's in the mix with him. And so we'll have to wait and see. And
let's stay on Jamal real quickly before we move on to Josh Mickens. A lot of fans get fixated by star ratings, and we can absolutely assure everybody watching and listening with absolute certainty the staff doesn't even look at it. They don't care.
No.
We know that. But a guy like Jamal, for the sake of the fan perspective on how they look at these kids, at some point he's going to be a four, don't you think? I mean, you kind of thought that was going to happen here recently.
Well, I've always been kind of high. Another kid that I've been high on is Keith Sampson out of New Bern. He's a 3-star. I've always thought, when I saw them two on the camp season, they were very dominant. But I thought, we had the mailbag. Somebody asked me who the top player I thought was. And, I love Noah Rogers and what he does. But, I think Jamal has built himself into one of the top player in the state, just his work. I mean, he posted the other day picture of him at Ben Smith when he was a freshman and then posted the picture just recently of Grimsley, and it looks like he had he multiplied, had the growth and the skill level he's did. I mean, we saw him. Me and Brandon P. were at Nations Ford at the Rivals camp, and there was nobody that could block him. He was so dominant, and he was so dominant. He had ripped his jersey and everything. So I think he is up there as one of the top players, and I'm sure that he's going to, when the new evaluations and rankings come out, that he's going to be a 4-star and be one of the top players in this state.
Josh Mickens, 4-star, weak side defensive end, 6'5", 225 pounds, rangy and big. Lawrence Central in Indianapolis. We do not discuss high school football prospects in the state of Indiana very often. We do more basketball guys. Jalen Washington, who's an incoming freshman in basketball, is from the state of Indiana. So And we're going to hit more on the Indiana angle here in a little bit, but just tell us about Josh Mickens, who's also coming in for an official visit this weekend. And then we'll dive into some of that other stuff.
He's in that position where, with the new football scheme, you're just kind of wondering if this is a true defensive end, is this going to be a jack guy or an outside linebacker? This guy he's got tremendous skill, and to get him to come down to North Carolina, this is, an Indiana kid coming down to North Carolina, it's big. And so Mickens, great player, and the staff they want him. So I think it's huge that he's taken one of his 5 official visits to North Carolina.
My phone's been blowing up, so I keep looking down. That's what I'm doing. I've got like 6 text messages and 3 phone calls in the last 4 minutes. Let's move on to our next topic we want to discuss here on the recruiting show, first edition of the recruiting show. And this is something you and I have been talking about for a while as well. Two different topics. We're going to split them up here. We're going to hit on star ratings first. But let's just kind of break it down a little bit here, because I'm sure, and I know some people have asked about that. We hear from people every once in a while, and I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening have started to kind of wonder this as well. Class of 2023, there have been 58, let's go to 6 5-star kids, 51 4-stars, 58 3-stars. 2 kids are unranked, Kayman Smith and Gabriel Fortuner recently was offered. What we're getting to here is that there's been a much higher percentage of 3-star kids offered in this class, especially once the change was made. When Bateman went out, Chiswick and Charlton Warren came in, and then, 7 weeks later when Bicknell came in with the offensive line. Most of this, though, is on the defensive end, and it started back in late January, and we started noticing it. So your take, and we'll have a discussion here, but your take on why so many 3-stars in this class?
Well, we talk in star language, and I know fans of that follow recruiting, they got to look at the stars. But like Andrew, like you said before, these college staffs could care less what star rankings these kids are. They base their offers on their own evaluation, and we've seen in the past some kids don't have any stars, or maybe low 2-star, and they end up playing in the NFL. So it's just, it's a question that I get all the time. I know you get all the time, but for North Carolina, they're just recruiting who they think will fit their scheme. And with Coach Chiswick and Coach Warren on the defense, and with Coach Bicknell on the offense, they're looking to see what kids they can mold and coach up and fit in this scheme at North Carolina. So I think that's a reason that a lot of these offers did go out, especially on the defensive side. I know with Warren, he's offered a lot of defensive backs, and with North Carolina's here the last few years, they've needed a lot of defensive backs. So and they've got basically like 3 positions now. They got corners, safeties, and now this nickel or star position that they're doing. So they're getting more kids in because they need more players.
All right, well, let's peel the onion here a little bit. That's fine, and I get that, and you and I totally understand that. However, this is a program that was offering a higher percentage of 4s previously. And if you look at the class of 24, they're offering a high percentage of 4s there as well, much higher than 23. There is a difference in what the star rating composite looks like for the offers in 23 as opposed to everything before. And then moving forward, when we start looking at 4, and eventually when the 25 kids get some rankings, they've gone after. It's early, so maybe you go after the real big-time ones early on. I know that Larry and other staffs do that, and then they sort of pull back. Some theories about why they're doing this. I think part of it is, and you know this is true, and you post it on the board, and I guarantee you that the staff, maybe not publicly, but privately, would probably acknowledge, look, when you go 6-7 and you have some of the looks that they had last year, it's not out of line to say the shine is off a little bit. And I think that you see that more on the recruiting trail than anywhere else. The shine was on a year ago, and man, they kicked some derriere. And they were able, even with the struggling season, they made such a good impression for a long time and had some of these kids like Zach Rice and Andre Green believing for a long time and totally bought in that by the time they made their decisions, they weren't finished having a bad season, an underachieving season. Even though Max has said many times here recently, well, I kind of knew we weren't going to be as good as everyone was making us out to be. I don't think he anticipated 6-7 with the ugliness in how 6-7 came out. So I think that's a big part of it, Deana. And I believe that they know they have great classes in, and they're going to go hard after a great class in 24. And if they turn things back around on the field this year and they go 9-3, which I think is highly potential, then they can kind of get that groove back again. And what this class can be is let's load up on a certain positions of needs. Sometimes, if you bring in a few diamonds in the rough, for lack of a better term, in a certain position, and one of them turns out, then that's pretty good. And this could be a good bridge/buffer class to what could be in 24. You get good program guys. You get very coachable guys. You get the kind of players that you think, again, they're not looking at star rating, but they know where these kids are. They have an idea where these kids are, and they're figuring we can get a few big-time players and real solid starters out of this group. That's a pretty good thing. I believe that's kind of what's going on right here, because last season, and we've had kids that have told you even off the record, yeah, that was a bad look.
Yeah, I agree with you. The first couple of years, the staff was, they were trying to invent North Carolina football. Mac had a lot of positive, and they got a lot of kids in, a lot of great kids in, high 4 stars, some 5 stars. And, when last season, it kind of, when you go 6-7, it's kind of a harder sell, to the players. So they, I think it's possible they can land some of these bigger kids in 23. But like you said, I think 24, they're going to go all out, because you gotta get on these high profile kids early, and stuff. So and you've seen in the class of 23, Carolina's only got 2 guys, because kids are taking their time. They're not rushing like they did with COVID, spots filling up, and plus Carolina's going to probably take a much larger class than they have the past couple years. So the net is wider, per se.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And that's a good way to segue into what we're going to talk about. And by the way, I also think, and I think you agree with me, that here we are, we're recording this on May 17th, that fairly soon we're going to start to see sort of a rush of commitments. There's going to be a consistent stream of commitments that are going to start rolling in here over the next few months. The segue part is that net. The footprint, the stated footprint has been Atlanta to DC, and DC includes suburban Maryland. So, for example, the kid from DeMatha, that's right on the other side of DC, that's inside the Beltway. All that counts. Even if you go a little bit outside the Beltway nowadays, that's all part of the Metro DC area. So that on down to Atlanta south a little bit, because Atlanta's a huge metro area as well. That's been the footprint. But they have gone outside the footprint a lot. This is another thing you and I have discussed as much as we have, probably more than we have the star ratings, about why. So let's kind of give a little breakdown right here. If you look at the class of 2023, all right, and interesting that the numbers are going up in Florida, which they had decreased the first few years of Mac Brown. They're picking back up now. 117 offers in the class of 23. 29 are from Georgia. 20 are from North Carolina, 16 Virginia, 16 Florida, 9 Alabama, 6 Texas. You'd think Fedora's back offering all of his nephews and stuff from Texas, right? 5 in South Carolina, 4 in Maryland, 12 elsewhere. And part of that elsewhere is the state of Indiana. I think there are 3 in the state of Indiana. So 76 of the 117 offers are from the footprint. It's only 65%. And Max said, hey, we're going to stay in the footprint because generally speaking, there's enough talent in the footprint. You can load up your roster and you can compete for something national. He said, we'll go outside the footprint to get the great ones. They're going outside the footprint to get kids that I don't think people are considering great prospects. They may evaluate them that way, and that's all that really matters in the end. However, the perception is that it's not quite going out and getting Sebastian Cheeks, for example.
Well, you mentioned Indiana. I'd say with Coach Warren being the defense coordinator in Indiana, and with Coach Bicknell when he was at Louisville, Indiana's right across the Ohio. So, I mean, that's the recruiting territory, and they probably saw and have known several guys, and you know, with the changeover, you know, Bicknell's picking his guys that he wants to coach. And we mentioned this in some other pods that with the coaching changes, I mean, just because a kid has an offer and then might have a coaching change, they still got to go back and all the coaches go back through and let's say per se offensive lineman, Coach Bicknell Mac wants him to be able to if Coach Bicknell likes and wants to coach him. If Coach Bicknell kind of defers, then they'll move on. But they all want to be on the same page. And so we've seen, you know, and even in the 24 class, they've been moving slightly up in that Midwest region. I've seen kids from Indiana. I've seen kids from Ohio and West Virginia and Iowa. So they're kind of being a little selective up in the Midwest part. And then, you know, you mentioned about Florida. I mean, it's like Florida and Georgia, you know, are just they got so many kids down there. And so.
And they're all over Florida. I was just down the Jacksonville Beach area a couple of weeks ago, and there's a ton of kids in that area. The Tampa, St. Pete, Bradenton, Sarasota, that whole region. You know, the Panhandle, which is where Michael Carter's from, there's a lot of kids there. And then, of course, you know, you get the Orlando areas loaded, and then you get down to South Florida. There's just kids everywhere. By the way, one of the things what you were saying about when the coaches go back out, the new coaches go out, they either defer or they reoffer. They essentially reoffer. And another note about Indiana is Charlton Warren was at Indiana before coming to North Carolina. So that explains that a little bit, but it still is outside the footprint. I mean, it's Mack Brown's program. It's Mack Brown's stated footprint. He has articulated that dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So it is interesting. I think another part of it, Deana, is that maybe there aren't as many high-end guys. You know, the Virginia's class of 23 isn't what 22 was. 22 was incredible. North Carolina was incredible in 21, a little bit of a drop in 22. So neither state is incredible in 23. So you got to go find your guys. Yeah, so they're going further out to find their guys.
North Carolina is always going to have some really good players, but the depth, I mean, it's really top heavy in North Carolina and Virginia as well. So they're going to have to go to Georgia. You know, they're going to have to go to Florida. They're going to have to go up to D.C., Maryland, and other places to find those players. So, I mean, they've offered 20 North Carolina kids, you know, and they've got one commitment out of North Carolina right now. And then there's some of them offers have already committed, you know, 2 big-time offensive tackle, Sam Pendleton and Sullivan Absher. They headed up to Notre Dame. So, you know, they're trying, but it's just, you know, goes back to what we said about the 6 and 7. You got to win. You got to win to get these players in. And, you know, I was asked about the fence in the mailbox. It was starting to be a pretty stout fence with a few leaving the state. But with those two big tackles, that's a big hole there. And I know Mac and his staff is going to try to mend it back and get back on track. But it's hard when these big national programs come in, the Georgias and the Clemsons and the Notre Dames and the Ohio States of the world. Excuse me.
Well, and the thing about it is that, Mac is really good at talking things up. They're good at providing all the things that are necessary, the bells and whistles and the more intangible things that are necessary to project the program in a certain way. And they're still doing a very good job of communicating that to kids. But ultimately, when you're in another state or even in this state sometimes, and you look at North Carolina versus some of these other programs, North Carolina has to have the Orange Bowl year, which, by the way, they were only 8-4 that year. They got to approach stuff like that more often than not in order for this thing to be consistent on the recruiting trail. Kids know, hey, that program wasn't a flash in the pan. This is actually something where they're clenched in, they've got roots, and this thing is going to hum for a while. That's why this coming season is so important, which we'll discuss more as we get. We'll focus on that in another one of our recruiting shows here. Another thing as well. The class of 24, there have been 35 offers so far, 6 from Georgia, 6 from North Carolina, 5 from the Commonwealth of Virginia, 4 from Florida, 3 from D.C., 2 from South Carolina, 2 Texas, 7 elsewhere. 25 to 39 offers are from the stated footprint. It's early, and I think you want to go after some of the national kids in that sense. But again, you talk about the fence. The fence was built and the fence is still there. But if you're not all that interested as much in what's inside the fence and some of those kids leave, you're not really losing them from within. You're just not that interested. I think Absher, who you mentioned, might be an example where a guy they wanted but they didn't get. And part of that may have been sort of what you lose when you make a coaching change. Do you think that maybe they were a casualty to Searles leaving, Bicknell coming in is a little bit different, and they lost some valuable time with a kid who was prepared to commit somewhere in May, which he just did?
You never know about these kids. I mean, Absher was really interested in North Carolina in the beginning, and then, the Clemsons and the Notre Dames they come in and everything, and some kids they handle recruiting different. I know Carolina was really high on Monroe Freeling and thought they had a really good shot of getting in his top list, and maybe they put more priority on Monroe and Absher, who knows, but they're not going to get either. They're not going to get either one of them because Freeland left Carolina off his top list, and Absher is heading to Notre Dame. But
that triggers another question for you, Deana. Staying here in 23 and going back to the star rating stuff that we talked about. Is it possible as well? They're like, look, we changed our defense. We're changing the defense. Some of the kids that were being recruited to the previous scheme don't fit this scheme, so they stop with them. They kind of trimmed off, their target list, kind of scaled it down because a lot of kids didn't fit. Also, when Bicknell came in, like, well, some of these kids I wouldn't recruit them. I wouldn't have recruited them had I been here the last year, that kind of thing. And they've kind of zeroed in and said, okay, we got to take what we could get in some respects. We got to get some kids. And if we invest a lot of time in some floors trying to reacquaint ourselves with new coaches with some of these higher end kids, not only we're likely not to get most of them, but then we might lose out on the next tier of kids that we want. So let's go ahead and focus this class after that next tier. Let's build up and have a real good year this year. And I do think the staff believes that they're going to be better than what a lot of people are saying, the complete opposite of a year ago. And if they had that year, then boom, they're rolling in with the fours next year. I think getting kids that you can get is a part of what they're doing as well.
And I'm going to tell fans that cover recruiting, the fans got kind of spoiled with the last two recruiting classes being so high. I would very cautiously tell people I would expect a 25 to 35 maybe range for 23. If
The ranking,
they'll
class
get
ranking.
some, yeah, for 23 they'll get some high kids, but I would not have that type of expectations when they had that class that included Drake May and Silver and Rah and all them. That was top 10 and everything. And then last year's with Travis and Zach Rice really helping, and Sebastian Cheeks and Bo Atkinson, really some high-end players that boosted that ranking. So just be cautious and that doesn't mean, the sky's falling too. I mean, a lot of these is going to build depth in the program, which they needed. And this club is young; they're young and talented, so they're trying to build that depth. That when Mac got here, this will be year 4. When he got here, he wanted to build the depth that he's used to having when he was at Texas and back, when he was at the end of his career at Mac Brown .1 at UNC back in the 90s. So.
Deana, I'm a big skyline guy. I've been to almost every major city in this country. I love skylines, and a good skyline has a couple of pop, buildings that pop, right? But a great skyline has good filler. You can have your 35, 40, 45 story buildings that make it look pretty grand and everything else, but you got to have some quality 20, 22, 25 story building kind of filling in there to really make it look majestic, make it look full. And I'm not saying these guys aren't skyscrapers or anything like that, but you've got to have that in a program in order to be successful. You just can't run off with nothing but 4 stars when you're North Carolina at this juncture and expect that to work. That's when you lose 15 kids a year. There is a process here. They're still working on the foundation in this program. It's not an overnight thing. North Carolina, Bobby Bowden always said it was a sleeping giant, and I believe that he was right. But, when the alarm goes off, we get up, some people hop up, get in the shower, they're into their day. I think North Carolina football, because of its history, kind of gets up, kind of sit on the edge of the bed, sort of rub your eyes a little bit, maybe look at your phone a little bit, have to reach for your glasses so you can read the phone a little bit better, get up maybe one foot in a slipper, the other foot in a slipper. I think that's how North Carolina wakes up. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and I do think they got their schedule this year. I mean, it's really nice. I think they could have a good year. They got to adjust to all the new schemes and stuff, but it's going to be a huge year. I've done said it earlier in the podcast. There, a lot of these kids are going to watch some kids. A lot of those wide receiver, tight end guys are going to watch how Bryson Nesbitt does. A certain quarterback in Charlotte, Jaden Davis, are going to watch, how Drake May does. A lot of people ask me about Jaden. I've seen him a couple of times now, and I think he's a really good kid. He's got a really good head on his shoulders. Reminds me a lot of Chris Leak. So these kids are going to watch what Carolina does this fall.
Yeah, and we're not going to do full on Jaden Davis, but there's definite interest there. Brandon saw him this past weekend, so we've seen him 3 times in person the last 7 weeks, I think it is, something like that. So that's pretty good. Hey, Deana, first, the recruiting show in the books. Good stuff. If you guys like the show, if you like the concept here, the recruiting show, go ahead and click like on this video. And if you are interested in sponsoring and becoming a part of the THI family as a sponsor, maybe get involved in some other things that we're doing as well. Our current sponsors have had a ton of success, but we've got more room. So let us know. Go to our Twitter handle at Heel Illustrated, not Heels, with the S, at Heel Illustrated. Send us a DM and we will get in touch with you and talk shop. You can sponsor the recruiting show all by yourself if you want. So there are a lot of opportunities there. She's Deana. I'm AJ. We appreciate you stopping by.
I feel honored to be the first guest. So
But it's your show. It's football. It's your show. Who am I going to bring on to talk about it? Who else am I going to bring on?
I don't know.
You think I'm going to bring on Kevin Roy? It would be Brett Friedander's favorite saying is the SHIQ show. It would be a SHIQ show with Kevin from the outset, right?
I guess. I don't know.
All right.
So,
Deana's going to be our first guest in the football show, and our second guest, and our third, and our fourth, and our fifth. You can be honored every week. It's my honor being in your presence, Miss King.
Well, I'm anxious. I got a busy schedule for the upcoming months with camps and stuff. So we'll have a lot of coverage on the recruiting front for Carolina.
Yep. Sounds good. And by the way, $833 a month. You could be an insider too. Thanks, guys.